You are listening to Earn Your Stripes, presented by Cardinal Spirits. Welcome to another episode of Earn Your Stripes. I'm Justin Albers, and I'm joined by my co-host, Max Bielfeldt. Max, how's it going? How's your week been?
It's good. Hump day. We're recording this on Wednesday, putting it out on Thursday, so getting there. Weekend's coming. I can smell it.
Yeah, you haven't had to deal with this Indiana weather, but I mean, I'm sure it's somewhat similar where you are. 65 degrees on Monday, and now it's like 20 degrees, and can't decide what it wants to do. Winter has arrived, my friend.
Yeah.
We talked on the Tuesday podcast, which I hope you enjoyed, our interview with Austin Hatch. We really appreciate having him on. But in our listener question segment, we actually created a new segment called Rules Are Rules, about some of the odd, crazy, fascinating NCAA rules that are out there. And Max is actually going to lead us off with our first edition of that segment. Max, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so Rules Are Rules. It's a new segment kind of inspired by some of the silly stuff that the NCAA is saying you can't do, and people kind of scratch their heads. But yeah, mine today is going to be a personalized one. So my sister's husband is Myers Leonard, who is the big 7'1" center from University of Illinois, and it was funny. I was talking to her, and I was talking about this whole thing, and she was like, "Yeah, back when we were at Illinois, my parents, my grandparents, and parents have a suite up at the Illinois football stadium, and she was with Myers, who they were dating at the time, and she's like, oh, let's like go up and see my family." And, Myers, he's like, well, I don't think I could do that. The compliance people are saying, we can't, because you'd be getting up there with a ticket that was paid for by an alumni of University of Illinois. So if he wanted to go see my parents while they were in town for the game, he had to do it outside at the tailgate and wasn't allowed to come up there and like hang out in the suite. So that's just, that was mine. It's kind of like, just, you don't have to come up and say hi. Like, what are you going to do? But, it's the girlfriend. That's just it. That's rules are rules.
Yeah, there certainly are so many, Max, and the rule book would take days, months to read. But I'd kind of, before we move on from this segment, that's a great first edition. I'd like to get your opinion on just the whole landscape of college sports and players getting paid or not paid. My opinion has always been that they should at least be able to profit off of their own likeness. If their signature is worth something, then they should be able to sell it and so on. And if it's not, then it's not. But I think it's kind of silly when they get into all the minutia of not allowing them to sign autographs and sell it, or if they win a bowl game and they sell their bowl ring, that's an NCAA violation. Stuff like that. It just seems really silly. What's your whole take on that, and how do you think it'll ultimately get rectified if it does?
Well, I mean, my whole take on that could be a whole episode that we might need to do at another time. But I think the question of paying them versus not paying them, I think that's not the first thing that needs to be addressed. I actually agree with you. I've really studied this a lot and read the studies. Like for instance, Indiana, they say if they're under the collective bargaining agreement that the NBA has, the average Indiana basketball player is worth about $905,000 to the university per year. And you look at, I did the stats, and you say the scholarship is worth it. And Yogi Ferrell, if you take his in-state tuition, room and board, and everything, and you divide it by the amount of games that we played my year with him, he was making about $750 a game. And I mean, I just it's just kind of funny because let's say his NBA career didn't work out. I'm just of the believer that he should be able to, while he's hot, be able to profit off that a little bit. I think the first step that would not harm a soul would be just setting up something simple like autograph signings. If Yogi wanted to, on his off day on Sunday, wanted to go to some local business in Bloomington and set an hour aside to sign some autographs and meet and greet with fans and get paid, $500, $1,000 for that. I think that's a win-win. The fans would enjoy it, the business would enjoy it, and Yogi would get a little profit from it too. But rules are rules. Can't do that. And that's kind of where it's at. But No, I mean, I definitely think we should have a whole episode about that one time, because there's so many debates, and there's so many, if I say one thing, everyone will have an answer, and I got to respond to that. So definitely should have an episode about that sometime. But yeah, that's kind of my take for now. I think the first simple thing is just, if they want to sign an autograph, just come on, like, you know what, it's their name, and I completely agree. Obviously, the NCAA is kind of tried to space himself away from profiting off people's particular names. I think Jay Billis tweeted out one time. Jay Billis is a huge anti-NCAA rules Twitter, and uses his platform as a college basketball analyst. But he tweeted out a picture. He went on the NCAA's actual website and typed in Johnny Manziel into the search bar. The first thing that pops up is a $90 Texas A&M number 2 jersey. And he's like, didn't even type in, at Texas A&M, just typed in Johnny Manziel. Kind of funny how this shows up. So, I mean, it's just things like that, and that they've spaced themselves away from the EA Sports using the likeliness of players. Now this is the dumb thing. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there's actually what they're doing now is, they used to sell, for instance, when I was at Michigan, and our top players were Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway. We would sell the number 3 and the number 10 Michigan jerseys with no name on the back, just that. And everyone kind of knew who they were, and all the NCAA athletes kind of were like, he's wearing my jersey, and it paid $60 for that. It's kind of like, it sucks, but he goes, the NCAA, what they're doing now is they're saying, we want to space ourselves away from that. So they're now just making jerseys. A lot of them are doing it this way. Some of them do it a little bit differently, but most schools are now making, it's like last year it was number 1. They would only sell the number 1 jersey. And now this year they're selling number 2. And next year it'll be number 3. And I mean, in my opinion, it's just very stupid. It's kind of not what, United States stands for in capitalism and everything. It's very, everyone's on an equal playing field when they're not. I mean, there's a business to college basketball. There's a reason that NCAA tournament is worth billions of dollars, and, you're Warner Ladders and you go to sponsor the NCAA. Just to have your ladder be the one that the kids stand on to cut down the net when they're playing, they're playing their last game. I don't know. I can get into that another time, but that's kind of here where I'm coming from, and just some things that make you scratch your head. So that's rules are rules for me today.
Yeah, I definitely think we should do a full episode on that. I'll share my opinions, my further opinions for that episode. That's what I think they call the teaser. Maybe we'll do that on one of next week's shows, because it's definitely worth discussing, and we could fill a full show with it. But I'm just going to offer one rules from just browsing the web for weird NCAA sanctions. And my rules for this episode is going to be one dating back to Perry Jones, who played, if you remember, basketball at Baylor back earlier this decade. And his story is one that I think a lot of high school and college players can relate to, because they come from not a lot of money, homes where they may struggle financially. And he actually got a 6-game suspension from the NCAA, and it was a result of his mother taking a $4,500 loan without Perry's knowledge from his AAU coach at the time when he was in high school. And the reason for the loan was because they had been struggling financially. The bank had foreclosed on their house, and his mother was battling a heart condition, so they were struggling to make the mortgage payments. She reached out to the AAU coach independently, asking for 3 monthly payments of $1,195. And the crazy thing is she paid those back to the AAU coach by the 15th of every month in the month that she was given it. So it's not like she was keeping that money for a long period of time, and he actually got suspended for that. So it's crazy. Like, a mom's trying to make it work for her son and her family. She's paying back what the AAU coach had loaned her. And I understand in essence why the rule would exist. You don't want the AAU coach having that much influence on the kid and where he might go. But I just thought that was kind of silly, and it kind of goes back to what Max was saying about being able to profit off your own stuff. If you come from a background without a lot of money, and one ACL tear or one serious injury could take away an NBA future from you, why not be able to profit while you're able to? But like I said, or like Max said, we'll get into that in a full episode. That'll be rules are rules for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you have any NCAA rules that you think are crazy or stories that you've found, feel free to share those with us, social media or email, and we'll try and incorporate those in future segments. It's time now for our featured interview segment of today's podcast, and we were lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to record a podcast interview with Matt Roth, former Indiana sharpshooter, and talked about a lot of different things with him. I thought it was a really good conversation. Actually, it was the first interview Max and I recorded together for this podcast, and we had saved it until now to release. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this conversation. Matt was always a Hoosier favorite and a guy that really loved the school, loved the program, and did everything he could. And actually has a really interesting story to share about Archie Miller and what Archie Miller had to say about his first memory of Matt Roth when he came in to Assembly Hall as an assistant coach for Ohio State, a day that Archie does not remember all that fondly. So I definitely think you'll enjoy this interview. Without further ado, let's welcome in Matt Roth to Earn Your Stripes. We weren't recording when Max asked you what you're up to now. If you would, just kind of update us on what you've been doing, where you are in life, where you're living, and kind of where your life has gone since you left Indiana.
Sure. Yeah, no, when I got done with my playing days, I worked for IU Health with their backroom kind of insurance plan for health insurance for about a year and a half until I got married and moved to Fort Wayne. And then I started doing some just basketball instruction and coaching. That ultimately led me to what I'm doing now, which I'm at Lutheran Hospital as the director of their sports medicine program. So we've got Optimal Performance Sports, which does anything from athletic rehab to performance training to sport-specific skill instruction. And so I've been doing that now for, I guess, almost 3 years. It's really a great place to work. I've got a really, really good staff. Very diverse. We've got, several different sports covered on staff, from playing experience or coaching experience. And then our executive director is one of the leaders in biomechanics in the Midwest. So certainly a fun staff to work with. And then obviously Fort Wayne, I came up here with my wife, and we've got a 3-year-old and 1-year-old son now. So we've got a nice little family life going and just kind of enjoying the process of getting older.
Congratulations on that, man. That's great.
Thank you.
I know the little I saw you after you had graduated from Indiana, you were always still in the hyper, the SRSC, getting shots up, playing pickup games. So how are you fulfilling that basketball itch these days?
Well, I still, we part of our sports medicine program is a sponsorship and partnership we have with the Fort Wayne Mad Ants, which are the Pacers affiliate in the Gatorade League now. So we have an NBA standard court in our facility. So there's a lot of days where over lunch or when I come in early and get a workout in that it involves some form of shooting workout or conditioning on the court just to try and stay in shape and stay a part of the game. So that's kind of my secret addiction at work, is being able to go down and get shots up or go mess around and shoot around with those guys.
I wonder how many ex-Big Ten players are still doing court conditioning workouts. That doesn't seem, that's good for you. I mean, holy cow. I mean, do you think you could still shoot 55%?
Wait a minute. You mean you're not, Max?
I play a little bit here and there, but he's court conditioning. That's I'll play up and down.
The first rule is fine. The conditioning you have a problem with. I see. I understand.
And suicides were never my thing.
No, the time restraints that you have to do the conditioning and have gone by the wayside, but I still like to try and stay in decent shape, and when you've got little ones at home, they always want to play, so it's always good to be in shape, and so still get in, get my shots up, and do all that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think back to your career at Indiana?
I think, for me, it's a lot of the good stuff, the stuff that kind of ended my career. That senior year, being able to bounce back, get us back into the tournament, and kind of reap the benefits of all those kind of dark years, those hard years where we were young, we were inexperienced, and so I think when you think back, the first thing that comes to mind is certainly those moments where you got to celebrate, where you got to kind of achieve those goals that you were after for so many years.
What do you think has changed about the game now, and specifically the college game? And I'd like to get Max's thoughts on this too, because he's an example of what I'm talking about, the graduate transfer, the ability to get that extra year at another school, and Max was able to do so within the Big Ten. What do you think about the way that's changed and how that has impacted the game of college basketball?
Well, I think it's greatly impacted the game. I mean, when you look at every year on all those social media, venues, you've got the guys who follow the game and track the number of transfers and the amount of time that guys are spending at places before switching schools. And then you throw in the grad transfers, which even when I played, there was kind of a lot of people wanted to call foul or, that just wasn't right kind of deal. And I think it's become much more accepted. When you look at it, the hardest part has to be as a coach and as a staff when you're recruiting. You've almost got to now recruit guys, and then you've each year got to go recruit transfers or fifth-year guys. And so I think it's made recruiting a lot more dynamic. I think it's going to continue to change until some different regulations get put into place on guys being able to go to the NBA, that kind of stuff. And if they adjust any of that stuff. But I think the thing that stands out to me is you've got to recruit two types. You got to recruit your high school guys, and you got to recruit transfers, because every year you're seeing record amounts of guys leave different schools.
I got a question for you. So in the Big Ten, having a transfer who is an upperclassman, junior, senior, or fifth year, particularly in the Big Ten, how important do you think it is to have an older team? Because I was listening to a podcast the other day with Robbie Hummel and Ben Brust, and I know from experience just understanding how teams play, understanding the ins and outs of basketball. These young teams, you can get the Kentuckys and some special ones that just they're dribbling down and throwing hoops, but for the most part, you got to be able to guard actions, and you have to be able to recognize it quickly. How important do you think seniority is on a basketball team in the Big Ten?
Oh, I think, going through it, we were the youngest team in the country my freshman year, and just not having that sense of veteran leadership of, hey, it's not easy, or hey, it is this hard. Like, this isn't abnormal. It is this hard. So I think that's a big key. I mean, I think you still want a steady mix of, youth and athleticism and kind of that youthfulness that comes with being naive, thinking you can kind of do it all as a freshman and a sophomore. And then you've got to mix in that leadership. And you mentioned having that Big Ten to Big Ten transfer. And I think back to it, and I can still remember, like it was yesterday, I could probably run Wisconsin's offense as easily as I could run our offense and Michigan's offense and all those different variables. And so I think that experience of, one, you're getting coached up at your current school. In your case, when you came to IU, you're getting coached up in their game plan and this, but then you also have in your mind, hey, when I was at Michigan, this is how we guarded this action, and this stuff is what works. And so it just gives you a whole nother perspective and ability to be a better leader, because you've been through it and you've seen different situations. So I think it's definitely a twist, but I think it is. I think in the Big Ten especially, it's more important than maybe any other conference too.
Yeah, and that was one of the hard things coming from Michigan to Indiana. Just simple things like, on a block-to-block screen, we help high and go under at Indiana. And it was the other way around at Michigan. It's just these things that have been nailed into my head for so long, for 4 years at Michigan. Just, having to get rid of that information, do it the way Greenwood was. I almost felt like a freshman.
Yeah, no, it's in some regards, yeah, you got to start over. So I think it's definitely a good thing, and it's been fun to watch some of those play out here in the last couple of years. You being the best example, because you came to IU, so I could root for you. Going to other schools, I can't quite root for you, but it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch those guys compete and see how they really know where they fit in the course of a game, and they can kind of plug themselves into different situations.
So you would say you still follow Big Ten basketball and IU a good amount then?
Yeah, I try and watch, as much as I can between, work and family life. I certainly don't watch like I used to, but, I try and stay up to date on everything, try and watch as many games as I can, Big Ten-wise. And then certainly when I use on TV, I'm always trying to get in front of a TV to watch that. So I still watch it. I certainly don't study it like I used to when I played, but it gets harder and harder, and so I try and step back and allow myself to enjoy, watching the games now, rather than feel like I'm living and dying by them.
Yeah, that's a full-time job in itself.
Here's a question for both of you guys. Both of you walked into Tom Crean fresh. Max had never played for him. He had a little less time than Matt, but Matt, middle of your career, Tom Crean comes to Indiana. I'm wondering how long it took to learn his sets, his offense, his defense, and how complex some of those sets are compared to what you had seen before.
Well, yeah, I think, with having him come in, with me coming in, with that coaching change happening as I was transitioning to campus, it wasn't quite as hard, but there was a certain level, for me being recruited by Coach Sampson, I knew very clearly from him what my expectations and roles were. And then with Coach Crean coming and being fresh to Bloomington, there was never really that time to sit down and really establish and lay some of those things out. So it was a lot more kind of feeling it out, which led to a lot of uncertainty at times. For me, and then ultimately what my role became as a shooter, it took me a couple years to get used to, hey, I've made, 3 out of 5. Why is he still on me? Well, 3 out of 5 wasn't good enough in his eyes for me. That
was his philosophy. Nothing was ever good enough, but in a good way. He could push people, which is...
Yeah, but for me, it took a while just because I had never, in my mind, that's over 50%, but he wanted more, and he always demanded more, which I think was a good thing. It helped me, it helped me really learn to achieve more when I'd come into the gym, when I'd do a shooting workout, or I'd come in and work with some managers on some different things. It wasn't always, about the amount of time I had, but it was about, the quality and how productive was it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was definitely a learning curve, having a coach come in who hadn't necessarily recruited you. And then certainly the offense, coach had a play and a set, and for every set we had 2 or 3 things that would break off of it. And so that learning curve, I can still remember my senior year, we'd be doing 5-on-0 fast break shell, which is fast paced. You got to think on the fly.
Yeah, it was never slow. We did the same thing.
And he'd call plays out, and all 5 guys would look at each other like, never heard of that one before.
I can feel for you there.
And we knew the play, but we just hadn't run it in so long. We just had to really think through on the fly. And there were a lot of times where we had to stop and walk through something. But that just speaks to, how prepared he was for games. And, he always had answers when you were prepping for a game in terms of what we were going to do, how many different play sets we'd have for each opponent, and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, talking about the plays, I was pretty lucky. I had Yogi Ferrell in his 4th year of Crean, on the court. So when he did call out a play that I don't think we'd run in 4 months, Yogi's ran it for 4 years, so that was a huge help for us. I don't know. I think that's part of the reason Indiana struggled a little bit at the end of last year. Missing the Yogi Ferrell and having a first-year point guard and a lot of new faces. Not even one senior. That's why I kind of was talking about the senior leadership. I think that's a huge part of it, and especially you understand playing for Crean how important it is to have that person.
Oh yeah, you got to have it, and Yogi was an outstanding leader. I think he really made things easier for everybody that was there. So having guys like that, it's key for us. We had with my class a great senior class that had been kind of battle tested, but then it wasn't until we plugged a guy in like Cody Zeller that we had kind of all the missing pieces. Adding a guy like that made the game easier for everybody else, and having a guy like Victor Oladipo continue to improve, as a sophomore when I was a senior, it made the game easier for everybody else. And so you've got to have those guys, and then you've got to have that leadership. And I think there's a lot to be said for having that leadership that's a senior, that's been battle tested and been through the ups and downs of Big Ten basketball.
Max, I want to get your thoughts on that just real quick. Coming in, you've talked about how long it took you to kind of get used to the going over versus going under and that type of stuff. But from a strategy standpoint and a set standpoint, a playbook standpoint, how long did it take you, and how difficult was that given that you only had 1 year?
Well, yeah, I think most of that plays into the style of offenses I came from. The beeline offense up at Michigan is almost Wisconsin-esque, where it's very structured and a lot of reads and kind of most things are planned. And, obviously there's some things that aren't, you got to go for it. But coming down here, it was funny. The first game we got out in Assembly Hall, I'm there and I'm kind of like my old habits kicked in. I'm looking for Yogi or someone to call the play, and I'm like, man, did I miss it? Did I miss the play? Like, what's going on? But then I realized, how much, it's one of the specialties. We ran and we played. And when you have a team that is veteran enough or smart enough to understand the actions of basketball, it's tough to guard. I was joking. I was talking to a buddy last night about when Michigan did the scout on Indiana. We'd play Wisconsin, and all right, they run the swing offense. We played Northwestern, the Bill Carmody team. All right, the Prince sent a lot of back doors. We'd scout it out. And Laval Jordan, who's now the head coach at Butler, he was doing the scout for that game. He was the assistant for Beeline, and we go, all right, Coach Jordan, what do we got? And he goes, guys, I tell you what, they have some actions, but they just run. Like, we just got to work on transition defense. We got to work on our principles. They just go. And it's tough to guard because they wear you out. They're well conditioned, and when you get a team that can play well, that's how they knock off the North Carolinas and all the Kansases. It's these big teams. It's tough.
Matt, who are the guys that you stay in touch with to this day, if any of them, from your time at Indiana? Is it some of the guys that struggled with you during the early days, or do you still stay in touch with some of the guys from your last year when you guys knocked off Kentucky and went to the Sweet 16?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us that try and stay in touch. I think, as we continue to get older and we've all kind of gone our separate ways, it gets harder and harder, but we've got a pretty good nucleus of guys that, stay in touch, and Derek Elston's, Jordan Hall's, the Tom Pritchards, we still stay in pretty good contact, whether it's, over the summer or getting back to Bloomington at the same time and just trying to do some of that kind of stuff. But it's fun. And then, I've been fortunate, both Christian Watford and then Will Sheehy have spent time in Fort Wayne with the Mad Ants. So with our work connection there, I've got to spend some time, with those guys. And then, it's nice. We had more guys come back this year for the golf outing in the summer, which it's one of those things as you get older, that's something you make a priority to get back to. So we stay in pretty good touch. It's here or there. It's been fun the last couple of years. There's been a couple NCAA payment things where athletes get some money back from different things that have happened. So we've kind of had a group chat going around about that. And, should we be getting a check from the NCAA for a video game scandal or whatever the other one is that's right now? I can't remember, but it seems like between Derek and Jordy, there's always somebody, nickel and diming each other trying to figure out who's going to get Derek right now wants the money for the current NCAA investigation on whatever it was, the fair market analysis of athlete loans or something. So since he was the one who found it for us, he thinks he gets a little bit of commission if anybody gets a check. So we stay in touch. Anytime we've had some, myself and a handful of other guys get married and all that kind of stuff. So when we can get back together and kind of reminisce and see where everybody's at. But we had my senior year, we had a really good team. We had a really good group of guys. And so anytime we can get those guys together, it's a lot of fun.
It's been interesting for me doing this podcast with Jordan last year, and just listening to him talk about that first year you guys came in and what that was like, having a coach come in that didn't know what he was walking into, and you guys walking into a situation I don't think anybody knew would be as difficult as it was. When you think back to that first year, what comes to mind for you? What do you still think about, and positive and negative takeaways from it?
Well, I think it forced us to really mature, not necessarily as players, but as people. We had to learn how to handle, adversity. We had good guys coming into the program that year. We brought Jordy and Derek and those guys in. I mean, we had guys that had never lost. Like in my case, I had never lost more than 9 games in any season from bitty basketball all the way through, and we won like 6 games my first year. And so we had to kind of grow up. We had to learn how to handle tough times and losing, which it's not fun to deal with losing, and so we had to learn to deal with that kind of stuff. I remember, things that stand out to me. It seemed like we were probably a better track team than a basketball team. I just remember running every day. It's one of the reasons I hate running to this day. And then, I think back, there's one game that really stands out about that year. We won one Big Ten game, and it was a Michigan State game. It was senior night, and we had Kyle Tabor as a senior, and all we wanted was just let's find a way to get him a win against a top 5 ranked Michigan State team who went to the Final Four that year. And we played about as well as we could play. I think we lost by 5. And I can just remember after the game, and Coach Crean was never one for moral victories. And he just walked in and said, guys, you play as well as you could play. And I just remember sitting there, I'm like, so we played as well as we could possibly play, and we're still not good enough to beat Michigan State. And I just remember that kind of humbling experience of, we're a long ways away. If we're playing, and we all felt like we played great games. Our execution was good, our defensive scheme was good, and we gave up an offensive rebound dunk. I still remember it, Jajuan Morgan to this day. I still remember it, and just kind of sitting there, and that's kind of what I remember about that year. I think we played a lot of really good games. We were lacking depth, we were lacking talent, experience, a lot of those things we've talked about having that senior leadership that's been through those battles. And would I have thought it would have taken another 2 years to get to a point where we could compete and win those games? No, but that's kind of what I remember about that first year. It was hard. We played great and still lose, and that was a hard one to learn to handle.
Well, it's a transitory point in life when you're jumping from high school to college anyway. So the freshman college experience, I think even for most student athletes is somewhat like you ease your way into it. But how quickly did you have to grow up, all of you guys coming in there and going through that right away? I mean, did you feel like you jumped a class or grew up quicker than you had anticipated going in there?
Oh, I think so. I mean, anytime you have that many young players coming in, the amount of minutes you're playing, the effects you're at, what a blue blood college basketball program where, losing's just not accepted, and you've got to learn how to, I still remember days you didn't want to walk to class because you just blew a game the night before to a team that you've never lost to, and so I think it forced you to grow up. It forced you to take some accountability for things. And, we had, after my freshman year, we had some guys transfer out and we had some guys leave. And, it really forced us to kind of put down our foot. This is kind of, we're not going back from here. We're moving forward. And, we had guys, we had, I think, 8 scholarship guys come in my class. And, we ended up with 3. Tom Pritchard, Verdell Jones, myself, and then we had Daniel Moore and Corey Barnett, and we were kind of those 5 guys who had to just find a way to move forward from it, and then find a way to help when Jordy and Derek and those guys came in. Just we're not going backwards. We're going one direction, and it's forward. And it took some time, and it took some recruiting, and that's one of those things where I think. Coach Crean and the staff did a great job going and getting guys that really fit what we needed. Guys who didn't want to take steps back. And, the Will Sheehy's who just, it didn't matter what that was. It was going to get achieved because Will just refused to lose. It's not who he is. And so having some personalities like that come in, I think we had the right guys in the right places, and it ultimately paid off for us.
So, you talked about losing sucks. You mentioned, you hadn't lost more than 9 games going back to Biddy basketball. Now, there's one thing we are both from the Peoria area. You're from Washington. I'm from Peoria. So, talking about Peoria basketball, I mean, looking back at that, I have to, because you and I are from the same. I saw we both got the Peoria Journal Star Player of the Year, and there's a lot of similarities. And obviously, you shot a lot more threes than I did back then. But I don't know, man. What do you think about Peoria basketball? Where do you think where do you think it's come from? And go there.
Well, I think it's in the realm of high school basketball. When you and I were both growing up, it was as good as it got. I remember, some of my early memories were of that Peoria Manual team that won 4 consecutive state championships with Sergio McClain, Marcus Griffin, Frank Williams, who all ended up going to Illinois. And then as we got older, I remember being in junior high watching a Sean Livingston lead his team to Peoria Central to back-to-back state titles. And I just remember basketball was rich. It was in the state finals or there in Peoria. It was high school basketball was kind of the crown jewel of Central Illinois. And we had several teams, in a short period of time win state championships. And then as I got to high school, no team outside of Peoria had ever won that Peoria sectional.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a freshman, being able to go upset the 2-time defending state champs, and then Peoria Richwood's team, who had 2 Illinois recruits, to be able to upset those guys and win that sectional for the first time. It kind of was a huge accomplishment, and one that you didn't think about until you start to look back at it, and you start to kind of realize that there's only, I think, four teams total who have ever won that Peoria sectional outside of the city now. And to be on 3 of those teams is kind of a cool thing for me to be able to brag about. Obviously we didn't overlap our playing days. I think I was 1-0 against Peoria Notre Dame, but that was, I think, before your time. So
yeah, that was. I mean, we had the Brian Randall era, going to Illinois, but besides that, Notre Dame basketball wasn't great, before we got it going a little bit. I went 28-1 my senior year. I was looking up a high school stats. And I was looking at yours. You get 22 points a game. It's pretty impressive. I got you by 0.5. I was 22.5 a game. So I got you on one thing. You did win the sectional. We didn't quite get there. We lost to a Peoria Central team. I always hated how they did the seeding. I complain about this all the time, and people might think I'm bitter, but I swear to God, they literally had the number 1, 2, 4, 6, and 9 team all in our sectional, just because they do it locationally. I'm like, guys, okay, we get it. Central Illinois is strong, but let's make the state championship actually a game.
Yep. Yeah, that was kind of always the fun part being outside of the Peoria area was, we knew that 1 or 2 of those teams would knock each other off, and we would probably only get 1 or maybe 2 of the top teams by the time we got to the sectional.
Yeah, lucky you.
So, yeah.
We played the number 9 team in state the second game in the regional.
No, it's, life's not fair. I think we've all learned that. So.
I know.
Hey, Matt, before we let you go, I want to get your thoughts on the current Indiana situation, your thoughts on the Archie Miller hire, what you've seen so far. I don't know if you watched the 2 exhibition games or not, but just the guys that that are coming back, what you know of the recruiting class coming in, and your thoughts on Archie Miller being the new Indiana coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I met Archie this summer down at the golf outing, and I didn't realize, he told me a great story about his first experience at Assembly Hall was as a young coach at Ohio State, and it just so happened to be my freshman year. And his scouting report was rather bland, and they played a zone, and he said he just got chewed up and down the sideline, cussed all the way back to the campus there in Ohio State because he didn't have anything on the scouting report about the guy who went 9 for 11 from 3. And so I didn't piece it together that he was there or even that was his scout. Looking back on it, it makes sense now. But at the time when I was a freshman, I was just hoping to be able to do something well in the games. And so that was a great story. We both got to laughing about that. And then, I think the hire is a great hire. I think he's a very good coach, but I also think he's a very good fit for what the program needs, the leadership it needs. He's kind of not quite a rah-rah guy, but he's a He's a feisty, competitive guy. That goes back to his career and kind of his steps along the way as a coach as well. And so I'm excited to see what that brings to the program. I've loved watching his teams at Dayton. And then, he's got a great staff, too. A couple of those guys I know. I remember Ed Schilling working with me at a camp when I was in high school. And he told me if I was going to shoot from that far behind the line, I better make 8 out of 10. And so he put me on the spot. I made 8 out of 10. I think that might have been luck at that point, but he and I go way back. And so I think they've got a great staff. I really do. I think their staff's going to do a great job recruiting. And for me, I'm not an Indiana guy by birth, but by playing career and education, I certainly am. And so I think this staff's going to do a great job recruiting the state and picking up some of the talent that's in the state. And then you look at the active roster, I think there's a ton of potential there. I think there's a lot of guys who are going to kind of have a big year. They're going to fall into or get placed in the right role for them. And at that level, everything's about what role are you filling for the team. And so I think there's some excitement. I'm looking forward. Jajuan Morgan's a player. I don't know him overly well, but he's a guy I've always liked. I've loved watching him compete, and I think he's just a great competitor. So I'm looking forward to watching him. I think Duran's up for a big year. I loved what he did last year, and I think it's only going to be better this year. And then, my favorite guy, I got to go back to my number 30s. I've known Colin since he was in high school, and for him to have the opportunity to come back and play this year, I'd be lying if I wasn't rooting for him a little bit more than everybody else. I just want
Sorry, so is the entire crowd.
He checked
in. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's a great young man. He's a funny kid, and the thing that stands out to me is, when I'm back or around the program, he's always asking questions. What was this like? What was this like? All this different stuff, all the way down to, do you think I was the first person ever proposed on senior night? And I was like, I couldn't be the first person to ever propose on senior night, but I just love the connection he has to the program, and you can definitely tell the amount of pride he takes in the program. So, I think the young guys, I think they're in the right situations. There's some good opportunity for them, but you're also not just throwing them out to, hey, we need you to go play 35 minutes tonight. It's, hey, here's your role. Here's where we need you to fill these gaps. And there's definitely opportunity for those guys to seize that and obviously find even more playing time. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward. I'm going to watch the game tonight. I'm excited to watch them continue to progress. I think it'll be a good year for them. I think it'll be a tough year at times, but the beauty of it is if you compete hard enough and you've got the talent, which they have the talent, they're going to find themselves in a good situation. I look for them to be in that top half of the Big Ten, even though, I know there's some predictions out there that aren't that way, but I think it's going to be a great first year. And then, as we start to look ahead at some of the recruits who just signed yesterday and a couple others that are still out there, my level of excitement for the program and where it's going to go here in the next, 2 to 3 years is, I think we've got some high expectations, and I think they're very attainable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, this is an Indiana-themed podcast, so we're going to have a little bit of bias. But overall, the thing that I notice is, the turnovers are down. 8 turnovers against UIndy and 10 turnovers against Marion in the exhibitions. You have the senior leadership coming back, and you're also, they held UIndy to 53 points, and they held Marion to 62. And they're not turning the ball over, and they're playing good defense like Archie Miller teams do. And they're going to be able to score. It's obviously the 3-point shooting is a little bit iffy. People get nervous about that, but seeing Colin come back in the UIndy game, he went 3 for 3 from 3. And you had Robert Johnson got hot a little bit, and you got some guys knocking down shots. So, overall, if Indiana's a stock, I'm buying.
Yeah, no, I think they're in for a good year. I think, as guys continue, and especially some of the young guys, really step into their roles, I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised. And the best part about it is I could see a lot of different guys stepping up in different situations and kind of putting the team over the hump on any given night. And having options for those impact guys, it's definitely something that's nice to have as you get into Big Ten play, because you never know what that night's going to bring, and having guys who can provide a spark or are that's a valuable asset, and I think they've got plenty of those.
So if Archie Miller ever has nightmares about Assembly Hall, we can blame Matt Roth. That's pretty much what I took from your answer to that, Matt. But I really appreciate you taking so much time to sit down and join us for this podcast. And great conversation, and thanks for doing it.
No, absolutely. No, thank you guys for having me. And it's always good to talk about Indiana basketball, and then having Max on board to talk about some Central Illinois hoops is always a good time.
Yeah, definitely, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll have to get that Peoria segment sponsored at some point. So maybe somebody in Peoria will listen, and we'll get a sponsorship deal out of it.
What do you think, Matt? Who's the best Peoria sponsorship we can get?
Well, I mean, there's a handful of guys there in Washington who I'd go after. I think anytime they can talk about basketball, they'd be just as passionate as we are.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Matt. We appreciate it.
Yep, no problem, guys. Have a great one.
Thanks.
And now we get to our Earn Your Stripes segment, and I'm going to go ahead and start it off. I think someone that, if you've watched any Indiana basketball this week at all, you're very impressed with. You got to go with Jajuan Morgan. He was the lone bright spot against Michigan, obviously winning that Earn Your Stripes, and again against Iowa had a really good game, just putting up a quiet double-double, and I think Jajuan, there was a lot expected of him this year. Just obviously he was in a great class with OG and Thomas, and a lot was expected, and I think he's kind of coming on here late. And I think the biggest thing I'm excited about is how he flies in there, and he'll get his hand on the ball. He might not even get it sometimes, but he gets his hand on the ball, and he a lot of the times winds up with it. But he does a great job of scoring around the basket. Make things work when he's around him. I think when him and Colin were in there together, Archie was saying how effective they were, and it really helped him pull away from Iowa. But overall, Jajuan, I've just been so proud of seeing him really get going. A couple slow starts earlier this year, but so far I was really impressed with what I saw with him against Iowa, and obviously against Michigan, he was the only one that could score on Michigan's bigs inside. Duran showed a lot of issues with the size of Mo Wagner, and Jajuan was definitely the bright spot. So Jajuan's got my Earn Your Stripes for this week.
Yeah, and I think that's well deserved. I think Mo Wagner said after that game that Jajuan just put on a clinic in the post, and I thought he really did. He played extremely well in that game, and one of my issues with Jajuan has always been, it seems like he's always his best in the big moments, but sometimes doesn't bring it when the opponent or the quality of the opponent isn't quite as high. And I think he's been a lot more consistent of late. So I think that's well deserved. And your Earn Your Stripes of this week, mine, I'm going to go with somebody you just mentioned, and that's senior Colin Hartmann, who really seems to be finding his footing as he returns from injury and starts to play some more minutes. Only played 20 minutes against Iowa, but he was able to put in 13 points. He made 3 threes, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal. He's just a guy just like Jajuan that can do a little bit of everything for you, and those numbers often don't end up in the box score, and those are the numbers that we're reading off to you, but they do so many other things for your team. Just the toughness and the basketball IQ that both of those guys have is so valuable to a team, and especially in Colin's case as a senior leader on a team that needs one. You're coming off a tough loss on the road at Michigan. You really need to get a win at home against Iowa, and it's great to see a performance out of Colin like that. I hope he continues to progress the way he has. I hope he stays healthy throughout this season, because he's a guy that Indiana really needs, especially to space the floor with his three-point shooting. But to see him be able to be a presence on the boards as well, and a big win over Iowa, Colin Hartmann is my nominee for Earn Your Stripes this week.
Yeah, he was the first one to knock down 3 3-pointers since Eastern Michigan for a team that's traditionally, Indiana's always been a great 3-point shooting team. Obviously struggling a little bit this year from behind the arc. It's nice to see someone get going from deep, and having Colin spice it up against Iowa, go 3 for 6. That was a big thing that Indiana kind of needed to do. They had Duke, obviously both teams were piss poor from behind the arc, and Michigan couldn't really get things going from 3. Not many threes being shot this year, but it's kind of nice, coming from the guy that shot a lot of threes in Assembly Hall. It's nice to see somebody else doing it and carrying the torch.
Yeah, and Indiana will definitely need both of those guys, Jajuan Morgan and Colin Hartmann, on Saturday when they play the cheaters from Louisville, who probably need to listen to our rules section sometime soon. But Indiana and Louisville will play on Saturday. You're probably listening to this on Thursday or Friday. That's a big game for Indiana, one that I think they can get. Louisville's been a little up and down. Indiana has been too, but it seems like Indiana, they're not just kind of flatlining or staying at the same rate. They're really progressing. And I thought, I don't know if you saw it, Max, the quote from Archie Miller after the loss at Michigan, when he was asked how disappointing that performance was after the Duke game. And he kind of just went on a 1-minute rant about, we didn't win the Duke game. You can't let any good feelings from playing what you perceive as well creep into your locker room, because then you stop the growth process. And I just loved his reaction there. The fact that he's not into the whole moral victory thing. He thought, like us, that they should have beaten Duke, and he wasn't satisfied with just coming close. And I think that's what this program really needs right now. And I was really happy to see that from him.
Yeah. And I think, obviously, probably should comment more on the Michigan-Indiana game because I have a unique perspective playing in both places. I think anytime you're coming off a moral victory like Duke, going to play Michigan, especially at Michigan, is so different because they're such a different team. Just the Beeline offense everything's scripted and it's very precise. And he's I would say the most organized coach in college basketball, just about what he wants, when he wants it, where he wants it. So his guys don't turn the ball over for the most part. They value each possession, and it's hard, for a team like Indiana, who was just playing a team like Duke and going up and down. It was exciting to go into a place like Michigan and have to guard complex action, and every back cut is right there scripted. Every action they pretty much do for the most part. It's like you have to learn their whole offense to be able to compete with them. And I think that's very different from what they faced against Duke. So going in there, you kind of saw them get shell shocked a little bit from the beginning, similar to what we did when we went up there. We went on that 28-0 run, which was very helpful in making us secure that win. But I think overall, I just want to say Michigan's a tough place to play and try to grow your team for, because it's a different breed of basketball you're playing.
Yeah, and from what I've noticed just from watching John Beeline's teams play, if you allow his teams to, because they space the floor so well offensively, so if you allow them to get comfortable and get a couple open threes early in the game, the floodgates tend to open because the confidence for everybody else soars and they tend to hit threes in large numbers. And that's kind of what happened in that game. Indiana's taking some bad shots early in the shot clock. Michigan is getting out and running. Indiana, I think Jajuan Morgan had left Duncan Robinson wide open for a three in the corner to come and try and sell out for a block. And that's just something you don't do, because once those shots start going in, they tend to keep going in, especially the way Beeline's team spread the floor. And that's kind of what happened in that game. So definitely something to learn from, but that's our Earn Your Stripes segment for this week. Hope you enjoyed that. Max, this episode, as always, is presented by Cardinal Spirits, and they want you to know if you're visiting for an IU game, you need to make sure you visit Cardinal Spirits for an incredible food menu. We know about the distillery. We talked to you about some of the different drink combinations you can make. 2-ingredient cocktail during a media timeout. You can be back on the couch watching the game and not miss a thing. But they also have a great food menu. It's not super fancy and it's not crazy expensive. It's just really great creative food using local seasonal ingredients. You can take your spouse home a bottle of Cardinal Spirits instead of another lame IU t-shirt that you have 900 of in your closet. So consider that the next time you're in town for an IU game, visiting Cardinal Spirits. And as always, visit cardinalspirits.com to see a full list. You can see their menu there, their list of products. And if you mention Earn Your Stripes when you go in there, you'll get 10% off your total order. So definitely give that a try the next time you're in town for an IU game. Another new segment we'd like to introduce this week, What's Binge-Worthy? And that will consist of what we're currently watching on Netflix, Hulu, TV, whatever platform you might watch on. These are the shows that we're watching. I don't know about you, Max, but I get texts constantly from people, friends I know. Alex Bozich, the founder of Inside the Hall, is notorious for this, texting me and asking me if this show is good or if you should start this one or what I would compare that one to. and people are always wanting to know what they should watch because there's so much content out there. You can't possibly watch it all. So people are always looking for recommendations. So for sure, let us know if this is helpful for you. And if you have any recommendations for us, feel free to pass those along. Mine this week is going to be a new show, relatively new from Netflix, called Mindhunter. Some of you have probably seen it. It's only been out for one season. It's a Netflix original and somewhat along the lines of Criminal Minds, a show that I've always enjoyed. For whatever reason, we seem to be fascinated as human beings with serial killers and just the crime dramas in general. And Mindhunter is set in the 1980s. It's kind of before the word serial killer was a known term, and before the behavioral science unit was a thing with the FBI. And it's the story of a couple of FBI agents that are going around interviewing what we would now call serial killers and trying to get inside their heads and figure out what makes them do what they do and kind of distinguish one category from another. So it's definitely binge worthy if you have seen it. I hate binging on shows that only have one season because it really sucks when it's over and you can't watch it anymore and have to wait for another season to come out. But I definitely think Mindhunter, if you haven't seen it on Netflix, is worth your time. 10 episodes. Give it a shot and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with one I just finished up. So Narcos is what I'm going with. I watched the first season of Narcos with Pablo Escobar, and that kind of caught flame as far as viralness goes. But Pablo Escobar dies. Sorry to spoiler alert. If you know anything about history, Pablo Escobar is not still alive. And so season 2 they come out, and it's more about who takes over from Pablo Escobar. And I was a little skeptical, and I watched the first and second episode, and I kind of let it drop off. But then I picked it back up and was watching the third, fourth, and that's where I really got hooked up again. I was like, oh man, this has some of the same flair. The Colombian drug cartel, the Cali cartels, what they call it, the whole cocaine trade, and going into the United States, smuggling it in. And it's the story about just how dirty that business is. A lot of true stories too, some crazy things. Learn a little bit about history too, and I think they do a really good job of animating that and illustrating it. So Narcos is my go-to. I'd give it a try. If you saw season 1, you're a little skeptical about season 2. Give it about 3 episodes, and you'll be like, okay, all right. I remember why I liked watching Pablo the first time. So Narcos is my binge-worthy episode.
Yeah, I've seen about 5 or 6 episodes of that, Max, and that's one of those shows, just so viewers know, it's not something you can be, working on your computer, reading a book, not paying attention entirely and watch, because large parts of it are in Spanish and you have to read the subtitles. So that's one of those, I think we as humans have a habit of trying to multitask and work on our computers or whatever it might be and watch a Netflix show. And that's one of those shows you got to give it your entire attention. And I've found that out the hard way. Tried to watch a whole episode, and then I realized I didn't even know anything that happened and had to rewatch it. And so that's definitely one that once you get into it, it'll have your attention and you'll really enjoy it. It's really, really well
that's
done.
So true. That's so true. And I think I need to make a disclaimer to all of our listeners is a lot of my show recommendations it's the ones that you have to dive into completely. I sit down, I tend not to multitask too much, and I kind of get drawn into it. So if you absolutely hate focusing on one thing and you have chronic ADD, don't listen to any of my recommendations because they're going to be way too intricate for you and probably way too complex for you to handle because you're not like me. No, I'm joking, but that's definitely what I tend to like.
Yeah, and both of those shows, I think there's 2 distinct categories of Netflix type binge-worthy shows, and one is what we just described, Mindhunter and Narcos. I think would both fit into that, where you need your full attention and you need to have some brain power still left in the day. And then there's the type of show, I always put Entourage in this category, but I love Entourage, where you could be exhausted and just need something fun to watch before you go to sleep or whatever it might be, and a little less dramatic, a little less intense. And so there's 2 different classes. We just gave you the class where you're going to need to pay full attention. So be ready for that. I hope you enjoy those recommendations. Some of you have probably seen both of those shows. Many of you have probably not. So give those a shot if you haven't, and send us your recommendations if you have any as well, because I'm just like everybody else, always looking for that next show to watch. That's all for this episode of Earn Your Stripes. Want to say special thanks to Matt Roth for being our guest. He was actually the first guest we recorded for this podcast. We did that interview several weeks ago, and I thought that went really well. Max and I were in person for the interview, so I think you'll notice the improved quality, and we'll try and do more of those episodes as we go forward. We're doing the best we can with what we have right now, and connecting remotely and connecting with our guests that way. But we definitely appreciate Matt Roth. I thought he provided some great insight, and I thought Max, you and Matt both shared some great stories about what it's like to learn to play in the Tom Crean system, because you both had to go through it. So different eras, but definitely a great guest to get. So we appreciate Matt. I appreciate you, Max, and all the listeners. Please subscribe on iTunes. Leave a 5-star review. We really appreciate, truly, we do, all the people that do that. That helps us prove this concept to companies and try and make $1 or $2 off this podcast if we can. So continue to spread it around, spread the word to your friends and family, and thank you for listening. Max, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think it was another good episode, and appreciate talking to you, Justin.
All right, until next week, this has been Earn Your Stripes. I'm Justin Albers with Max Bielfeldt. Everybody enjoy your weekend. Hopefully Indiana beats Louisville, and we have a lot to talk about next week. We'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.
I said, hey, you, perfectly on cue. At the end of the night, as I recall, I said, hey, babe, when you walk my way, you caught me on fire. Save me